Since its creation in 1991, the Chicago Cultural Center has been the artistic epicenter of the city. As the nation's first free municipal cultural center, it's one of Chicago's most popular attractions, providing arguably the most comprehensive art showcase in the United States. Home to over 1,000 programs and exhibitions each year, it stands as one of the city's crown jewels. But before it was the artistic mecca we see today, the building that lodges the Cultural Center was home to Chicago's Central Library. Built in 1897, shortly after the World's Columbian Exposition, the space was designed and constructed to grab attention.
This is a very important building to the city's past. It was its first permanent public library, and at the time when it was built in the 1890s, cities across the world were essentially trying to outdo each other with their public buildings and putting these really sort of high decorative features and ornamentation in them, which was very indicative of the time.
Today, over 100 years later, one of these decorative features is still setting itself apart from the others. Located in the Cultural Center's Preston Bradley Hall, the largest Tiffany glass dome in the world is still a sight to behold. Approximately 38 feet in diameter, the dome spans more than 1,000 square feet and holds close to 30,000 pieces of stained glass in 243 sections, all contained within an ornate cast iron frame. Louis Comfort Tiffany designed the dome to grab the attention of those entering the room, and by all accounts, he succeeded.
It meets the same standards in quality construction of the entire building, which was really to build something for a minimum of 100 years or longer. I mean, they really built for the long term. Back then it was a public building, it was a very important public building.
Since the hall below the dome was originally the library's reading room, the more light that managed to find its way inside, the better. This situation was helped by the fact that the dome was originally protected from the elements by a translucent shell that covered its exterior and allowed natural light to stream into the hall below. However, in the fall of 1935, an opaque copper and concrete shell was put over this clear cover, eliminating the daylight that flowed through the dome altogether. It's still a mystery as to why they did this, but there are some theories.
The only thing we can reason is that it was due to sealants. The sealant technology was fairly poor, and they must have been getting leaks in and getting complaints from the library patrons or the staff here. There's some allusion to that in the board minutes, but they never actually spell out exactly why they put the skylights in. And so we're just believe it was probably maintenance problems.
Afterward, the dome had to be backlit with artificial lights. Probably not what Tiffany had in mind when he initially conceived it, but now the only way to illuminate this stained glass masterpiece. As for the success of this new lighting system,
they created hot spots, and it was a metal halide lighting which had a limited range of color. The color spectrum was poor on it. Lots of colors in the glass, especially the reds and the pinks and the oranges, were being lost.
So, for roughly the next 75 years, the dome was deprived of sunlight. And to say it lost some of its luster would be an understatement. However, it was still a magnificent sight that drew thousands of eyes upward every year. Then, in 1991, the library moved to a new location and the city's Department of Cultural Affairs took over the space. A few years later, in 1997, while the building celebrated its centennial, people inside the department began looking into restoring the dome back to its natural finishes and features. A survey was conducted to determine its actual state and condition, and what they initially found wasn't all that surprising.
It was really beat up. It had a lot of cracks and breakage on it, and for quite a while, many of us felt that that damage was caused by electricians working on the lighting between the domes. Over the years, they had added some forced air and other heating components that were maintained, and maintenance people were being blamed for a lot of that work.
In total, they found that 15 to 20% of the dome had issues that needed to be addressed. Over 1,800 pieces of glass were cracked, and dirt had accumulated over literally every square inch of every piece. And even though routine maintenance may have played a part in the dome's poor condition, it was by no means the most significant reason. When Cultural Affairs inspected the dome, they made another startling discovery. Rough chunks of clear reflective glass that are part of the dome's panels were facing upward toward the ceiling, rather than into the room. This could only mean one thing. Somewhere along the line, someone flipped the panels, essentially turning the dome inside out.
We have found that in 1935, they inverted the whole dome. They turned every art glass panel below the oculus over on its back. And because there's a curvature in the lower panels, it caused stress cracks in the glass. It basically was bending the panel back over its spine. And that led to a lot of breakage and cracks.
Again, nobody knows why they may have done this, but it's speculated that the panels were beginning to sag and were reversed in order to straighten them out. Neil Vogel, however, has his own theory.
My personal belief is that it was 1935, Tiffany and the Victorian era were passé. They wanted to make the building feel more modern, and they actually reversed it so that they could take the texture of the glass and put it upward towards the skylight. And that would make the bottom feel more smooth and streamlined and modern, and I think that was the real intent.
Armed with all this new information about the condition of the dome, it was decided that a full restoration was needed.
We started working on this project to, one, assess how much funding it would take and what degree of work would we have to accomplish to do that. And finally, after about the 10-year period from 1997 to 2007, we had raised the funding through various sources to do it.
With a budget of roughly $2.2 million, restoration on the dome began in December of 2007. Each of the art glass panels was first carefully removed and replaced with a translucent wallpaper replica so the Cultural Center could continue holding events in Preston Bradley Hall. Coming up, we'll take you to Evanston and show you how the dome's stained glass panels were restored. Then journey back to the Cultural Center, where daylight finally finds its way back into Preston Bradley Hall after a nearly 75-year absence.